Bob Monkhouse was famous for his razor-sharp wit, but behind every one-liner was something far more precious: his joke books. These weren't just notebooks, they were his life's work. Decades of ideas, punchlines, sketches, and observations, all handwritten in his meticulous style. In 1995, during a charity event, those treasured books were stolen. For Bob, it was devastating. He described it as losing part of his mind. These weren't replaceable props. They were the blueprint of a lifetime in comedy. Every joke he'd crafted, every thought he'd refined, lived in those pages. The theft became national news. Fans, fellow comedians, and even people who had never met him felt the loss. Bob kept performing, but the absence of those books weighed heavily on him. They were more than material. They were memories. Then, years later, something remarkable happened. The books resurfaced. They were returned anonymously, without explanation. No fanfare, no confession, just quietly placed back into the world where they belonged. For Bob, it was a moment of genuine relief. He said it felt like being reunited with old friends. The return didn't erase the pain of losing them, but it restored something deeply personal: the continuity of his craft, the record of a lifetime spent making people laugh. Today, those joke books stand as a testament to his dedication. They remind us that comedy isn't just performance, it's craft, discipline, and heart. And in Bob Monkhouse's case, it's also a story of loss, mystery, and an unexpected act of kindness.
Comedy king Bob Monkhouse spent a lifetime meticulously compiling 2 amazing handwritten books containing thousands of jokes.
He was a joke machine from day one, and that's what he carried on being. He was a Gatling gun of gags.
The books meant so much to Bob, he called them his babies.
He used to sleep with his joke books at the side of the bed.
But one day, Bob's babies suddenly vanished. He was devastated.
Just let me have my books back. They're my property. They're my next 5 years of work.
And it was his life's work. And it was a massive piece of his infrastructure.
Detectives were onto the case of the mysterious missing gags.
It had been made apparent that if they weren't to pay the reward, that the books would be harmed, destroyed, or gotten rid of.
A trail of clues would lead police to a mystery South African.
It's amazing. All I'm trying to do is hand the books over rightfully to the right people, but they weren't listening.
Blackmail, rewards and scandal. The tale of the thief of bad gags has never been revealed until now. "1995 was a turbulent year. A disastrous earthquake hit Japan. Catastrophic flooding caused devastation in China. And as France detonated 5 nuclear devices in the South Pacific, there were mass protests on the streets of Tahiti. Meanwhile, a small island in the Northern Hemisphere was rocked by its own crisis.
For once, Bob Monkhouse didn't see the funny side today. A thief has stolen 2 of his joke books filled with gags and sketches from the past 25 years.
Every gag, every notion, every script, I've got movie outlines in there, a play, a novel, all the outlines that I've thought of are in those books. My entire creative output is in those 2 ledgers.
The theft of Bob Monkhouse's joke books has stuck in popular consciousness, filed away under terrible tragedies, not of naff celebrities. Second only to the accidental appearance of Judy Finnegan's boobs on national television. But there is much more to this story than a flash of flesh. And there was much more to Bob than naff celebrity. Bob's whole career was built on gags. He began in the 50s as a joke writer and went on to become an actor, game show host and slick stand-up comedian.
Say this for myself, I've never been to bed with an ugly woman. Woken up with a few.
He was the master of one-liners.
Vice President rushed in the Oval Office. Mr. President, Gaddafi's on television. Switch it on, George. I love that little duck.
Filing gags away for reference in his precious joke books, Bob became one of Britain's most successful and enduring entertainers. Bob wasn't naturally funny and relied instead on the perfect delivery of source material. It was an act less personality-led than his contemporaries like Morecambe and Wise and Tony Hancock.
Mr. Bob Monkhouse.
But Bob Monkhouse could attract TV audiences of 20 million. Even in his 70s, right up until he died, he was still in high demand and firing out one-liners.
I have good news. Michael Jackson's baby just said his first word. Help! Help!
But the theft of his books threatened everything. In July 1995, Bob was recording his hit show, Bob Monkhouse on the Spot, at the BBC TV Centre. In a production office above Studio 8, he left his metal briefcase, containing 2 books full of jokes. But these were no ordinary joke books. They contained meticulously handwritten gags and ideas on comedy which Bob had collected over 25 years. They meant everything to him. It was a bizarre attachment that meant he'd slept with them next to his bed every single night. After leaving the case in the production office for around an hour, Bob picked it up, packed it into his Mercedes, and headed off home to Bedfordshire. 3 days later, Bob went to Great Windsor Park to deliver an after-lunch pre-polo match speech organised by company chief executive Michael Smith.
He said, let me go to the car, because I've got some prompts there that I want to use. And we walked back to the car, and he opened the trunk and looked for his twin-lock files, and they weren't there. He said, Mike, you can't believe this. He said, everything that I used has disappeared. He was distraught, obviously. He said, I will now have to think of something on my feet. I will also use the Sunday papers as a prompt. And he got the News of the World and the Sunday Times and so forth. And went through a whole load of jokes that he pulled out from the papers and events at the time. It passed off as though nothing had happened. You wouldn't imagine that he'd lost a whole lifetime's jokes in 2 twin-lock files.
As soon as Bob finished his performance, he hightailed it up to the BBC.
I'm a comedian, by the way.
He was praying that he would find the source of his one-liners somewhere in the production office.
Everybody laughed when I first said I wanted to be a comedian. Well, they're not laughing now, are they? I'm still enjoying sex at 74. I live at number 76, it's no distance. I would never be unfaithful to my wife for the very simple reason that I happen to love my house.
The books were gone.
It's hard to imagine who is finding it less amusing, Bob Monkhouse or the person who's stolen 2 of his joke books, the comedian and...
One thing a man of Bob's profile could rely on now was publicity. It gave him a chance to make a heartfelt appeal for the return of his books.
I'm devastated by it. My wife's very supportive, and she did point out to me that I haven't lost a leg. Frankly, you can have a leg if I can have the books back. I'm joking, of course. I don't mean to be light-hearted about losing a leg, but I'm trying to be light-hearted about this blow of losing all this material. My entire creative output is in those 2 ledgers.
The ultimate irony was that the king of one-liners became the butt of one-liners himself, as the press waded in to ridicule him.
I think it's really cheap for someone with no wit to criticise someone for having no wit. And what was it called? Raiders of the Lost Lark. You know, a crap pun. Do you know what I mean? So a crap pun followed by an insulting crap joke to prove that someone who's been around for 50 years is crap. Well, clearly he's not.
Not only did the press treat it all as very much a joke, and I think it was the Daily Mail or some equally intellectual publication, said, right, we've got to help Bob out here. This is a man who's been in the business 45 years by now, and we've got to help him out. So we all write a gag and help Bob's career on.
Readers sent in hundreds of bad gags which were printed on the premise that they would replace Bob's lost jokes. But it wasn't just the public who joined in. Fellow comedians donated gags too.
We were a bit light-hearted, dismissive about it, and that would have hurt him, because he would probably think, well, why are my fellow professionals, can they not understand that I do need the book?
When his books went missing, I thought, well, I know where they'll find them. In Tutankhamun's coffin. Because most of them are old as the hills, you know.
What would have been embarrassing, though, if someone had stolen the ring binders and left the jokes, that would have been less than good.
And even we in the business thought, come on, Bob, you know, who are you kidding, joke book. And then we realised that he had done this, and it was his life's work.
The baffling case of the stolen joke books had only just begun, and it was already about to reveal the first twist in its tale. The victim of the showbiz crime of the century was about to find himself on the wrong side of the law. In 1995, the hunt for the thief of bad gags gripped the nation. Comedian Bob Monkhouse's cherished joke books had been stolen from an office at the BBC.
Sort of a bit kind of Cold War. Somebody's gone in and they're going to bring down the British because they'll steal their jokes and then they won't know how to cope.
The comedian and compere of countless game shows has offered a reward of £10,000 for the return of his collection of gags, some of which are more than 25 years old.
Please let me have the books back. £10,000 in cash, using any broker you care to name. BBC Television, any of the newspapers, any of the TV stations. Just let me have my books back. They're my property. They're my next 5 years of work.
On August the 3rd, 1995, the Times letters page included earnest views on global subjects, such as Hiroshima, the sovereignty of the Falklands, and the burning issue of Bob's £10,000 reward. A hawk-eyed Essex police inspector was about to make things even worse for Bob.
You could imagine him sort of at the breakfast table going, oh, I can finally write a letter to the Times because I'm going to sort this out, this Bob Monkhouse chap, you know, because I don't know, you would think he would be on his side because Bob's upstanding citizen, sure he's never done anything really wrong.
Inspector Peter Dolphin's letter was, well, less than helpful. He claimed that by offering a reward with no questions asked, Bob had fallen foul of Section 23 of the Theft Act 1968, and himself broken the law.
The police were saying, look, you're letting the guy steal and he's going to get off scot-free. I could understand that, but I could also understand Bob wanting his books back. I'd be the same if I'd been that detailed about my career.
So that was very odd that he then becomes a criminal now. Bob Monkhouse is a criminal.
So how's a comedian supposed to know how the legal system works with regard to rewards? All our lives we've seen cartoons and films with reward, £10,000, bounty hunter kind of thing. It's ridiculous. So Bob's now a criminal.
Well, almost. Police threatened Bob with prosecution, but in the end decided to show mercy and let matters lie.
Funny if Bob went to prison for a reward. And then Bob ran away from prison, he escaped, and they had to put a reward out for Bob and then arrest themselves.
The books clearly meant everything to Bob. He even referred to them as my babies. But why did he cherish them so much?
For Bob, it was the alpha and omega with the jokes. He is a gagsmith, and these were not joke books, they were gag files. That's what's really important in this story. You can go into any shop and buy a cheap joke book. You can open a Christmas cracker and get cheap jokes. But these were gag files, and he never stopped writing the jokes. He was a joke machine from day one, and that's what he carried on being.
I'm a comedian, by the way.
He was a Gatling gun of gags.
Everybody laughed when I first said I wanted to be a comedian. Well, they're not laughing now, are they?
And he never stopped telling or writing gags, and I think that was his secret weapon.
It was a secret weapon he couldn't do without, because whilst there were comedians who could make audiences laugh before they even opened their mouths, Bob Monkhouse wasn't one of them.
If you think about the early days in Bob Monkhouse's career, he didn't have anything going for him as a stand-up comic. He was extremely good looking.
He had matinee idol looks. His hair was slick, his face was slick, his jokes were slick.
His own teeth, his own hair, in good shape. I mean, really very attractive. And that's a handicap for a comic. If you look at all the... You need to have a face that's been lived in. Ken Dodd, for instance. I mean, Ken's got a face to die for as a comic. Benny Hill. Good evening, sir. Tommy Cooper with the fez. All that was around Bob's era. All larger than life. But Bob had to do it purely on the material he delivered.
And the material was in the books. They were an awesome supply of gags, as Jim himself discovered before a TV appearance with Bob.
And I needed a gag to go on with. He said, what do you want? Where do you want to be? I said, well, talk... And I forget the subject. Lighthouses. Oh, yeah. That's red pitch. And it was all beautifully written, like all scripted, absolutely. And he must have done some every day of his life. Although comedy is supposed to be an art, Bob's made it a science. He dissects comedy, he rationalises, he works it out, because he has to work, I think, a little bit to be funny.
So Bob clearly needed the books for practical reasons. They were crucial to his technique as a comedian.
Once with my first wife, I made her eyes shine in bed. I shone a torch in each ear.
But their disappearance also seemed to hit him on a much deeper emotional level. More than a reference guide, the missing books were also a comfort blanket. Throughout his career, Bob had used comedy to heal deep wounds caused by a traumatic family life. He referred to this as Dr. Theatre. The obsessive writing and performing numbed the pain from the difficult relationships Bob had with his mother and two sons, who both died in tragic circumstances.
First son, Gary, had extreme cerebral palsy, which meant that he couldn't stand or hear or talk or use his hands or arms or walk. And his second son, Simon, was born healthy but seems to have taken the divorce of his parents extremely badly and become estranged from Bob.
Simon gave newspaper interviews attacking his father. He accused Bob of airbrushing him out of his life and somehow using his disabled brother to boost his image as a warm, caring man. Bob was deeply hurt.
But he used this expression, doesn't he, Dr. Theatre. And it applies to all of us. Whatever problem you've got at home, however horrendous, if you're booked to work that night, it's the old boring old, the show must go on.
The personal problems you have in your life are there with you till you step on stage. Then the spotlight hits you and you seem to switch on then. You're right, you know you've got to do it. It's all gone. All the deaths and all the problems have gone. You're out there.
Gary died aged 40 in 1992. Bob tried hard to patch things up with his other son, but Simon became increasingly distant, and his life began to fall apart as he descended into drug addiction.
Goes off to Asia, and in April 2001 is found in a Thai hostel with a needle in his arm and a bag of heroin by his side, and he's dead, and the family don't know that until 3 weeks later. Bob's spoken about this. It clearly devastated him, but they were still estranged when this terrible thing happened.
I think for people to relate to how important the gag files were, you have to think of what they mean to him. You cling on to whatever gets you through life, and comics are obsessive, and I think comedy to him is like some people might turn to drink, some people might become a fitness fanatic. With him, it's the comedy.
Even Les Dawson, who had quite a lot of trauma in his life, Les would walk on was still hilariously funny, or any of us.
He's absolutely right, Dr. Theatre. It does anaesthetise the pain, only temporarily, but it does take it away.
Maybe it's only comedians who can really appreciate what happened to Bob when those books went missing. Even people that I've lived with in my life never understand what it is to be a comedian, as I can't understand what it is to be a teacher or a plumber. But when those books went missing, Bob definitely lost part of his life. And I can completely empathise with it. His whole comfort zone had just been shattered and broken down.
A month after they went missing, Bob had finally given up all hope of ever seeing the gag files again. He poured himself his favourite tipple, a large 18-year-old Macallan malt whisky, and toasted his book's disappearance with the words, "Bye-bye, babies." But they weren't so easy to forget, and a theory was eating away at his mind. The more he pondered on the mystery, the more he became convinced that the books had been stolen for the jokes themselves, most likely for sale overseas.
There are lots of different circuits all over the world, and you can make a living doing someone else's act in another language for quite a long time until someone finds you out, and then presumably you do a runner.
It must be some kind of international comedy syndicate or something, you know. Yeah, right. Some kind of comedy mafia, you know. Don't upset them or you end up with Nookie Bear's head in your bed or something. Or if you really piss them off, Debbie McKee.
Bob writes good jokes, and the words will speak for themselves, so all you have to be is a human karaoke machine, and you can do his act quite easily.
So I suppose it is possible that there is an Azerbaijani Bob Monkhouse somewhere, you know, doing some great jokes about his dog having no nose or something.
The concept of the book being stolen for its material, for its content, rather than for its value to Bob as a possession, is quite understandable, because gags are at a premium for any comic. New gags are at a massive premium. But a book full of gags, an encyclopedia full of gags, is a pool's win to a comic.
And Bob became convinced that he knew who that comic was. He ditched his theory about an international joke thief and came up with a prime suspect who was closer to home.
Such was the scenario and the height of the profile of the whole incident. Everybody was being pointed at. BBC, in-house, floor managers, technicians, runners, researchers, everybody was because Bob wanted you back, you see.
I want you to give a big, big welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Adrian Walsh.
Bob's finger of suspicion finally rested on a comedian called Adrian Walsh. Like Bob, he was an old-school gagsmith and keen collector of books on comedy.
Wow! Thank you very much, and thank you, Roy. Isn't he the most relaxed performer you've ever seen in your life? He makes Val Dooningham look like a breakdancer.
Walsh, an early winner of talent show Rising Stars, had worked as a warm-up man on Bob's shows and was a regular on Cruise Ship Cabaret.
I went in the supermarket last week. There was a big sign, "Please do not fondle the fruit, ask for Julie." Now,
Adrian is very much a slick, good-looking, very smart, fast-talking comedian in Bob's style. So I could see why people could say, well, it could be. It's an awful thing to suggest. Quite awful.
do you know when you walk in the supermarket and the door's open for years? I thought that was a coincidence.
Walsh was writing gags for Bob Monkhouse on the spot and was using the production office where the books were last seen. For Bob, this put Walsh right in the frame.
I think Bob Monkhouse thought Adrian Walsh had pinched him, but I don't think so, because Adrian Walsh couldn't tell them. There's only Bob Monkhouse can tell Bob Monkhouse gags. It's horses for courses. Adrian Walsh, he does the liners. I think he does the P&O liners and the Cunards going about the world. And with an act like that, you've got to keep on the move. He's about as funny as Woodworm in a cripple's crutch.
Do you want to have a bit of fun in the supermarket? Do what I do. Shop from other people's trolleys. And you know what's even better fun? When their backs turned, sticking a frozen turkey about 30 quid's worth.
Now Bob's not being rational, and I can understand that. He certainly doesn't want to confront Adrian. He can't, because I think Adrian's bobbed off on the QE2, so he's left the country. So that heightens Bob thinking, hang on, he's cleared off.
A friend of Bob's drove to Southampton to confront Adrian Walsh as he arrived back on the QE2.
Adrian, who was mortified, and came so mortified, he went back to Bob and said, look, Bob, I wouldn't even open a book. Never, he said, I don't care what other people think, as long as you know I didn't take it.
Did he honestly expect, if he had nicked the gag, that he was going to go, yeah, fair cop, yeah. Do you want them back? They're not working. I tried him on the QE2 for 6 months, and I need to nick someone else's now.
Bob said that if there was a fire in his house, he'd get his wife and those joke books and get them out of the house in that order. So For Adrian Walsh to be accused of stealing those joke books, that's tantamount to someone having an affair with your wife. That's the gravity of this situation.
Rumours that the books were in Walsh's hands began to spread on the comedy circuit.
For a comedian to walk into a dressing room and everyone in that dressing room to think, oh, because then they start to worry that he's going to steal their stuff, so then no one wants to work with him. So it kind of snowballs to the point where, you know, you're kind of ostracised in your own community. And yeah, I can't think of anything worse than me walking into a dressing room and people thinking, oh no, better not do my new joke in case Adam steals it. So no, that's very sad.
Despite his protestations of innocence, Walsh remained in the frame for 16 months. But then in November 1996, Bob Monkhouse's agent received a dramatic phone call from a mysterious South African which cleared Walsh's name and changed everything. An Englishman, Irishman and a South African were to take part in a high-tech police sting led by Detective John Murphy.
I was mounting this big operation in the middle of the robberies, drug cases and everything else that was happening around me. But somebody had taken his memories from him, and I thought that was worth the trouble to get them back.
The mystery South African Murphy was chasing has never spoken out until now. After his precious joke books went missing from a production office at the BBC, Bob Monkhouse had given up hope of ever seeing them again. But 16 months after their disappearance, there was a dramatic phone call to his agent, Peter Pritchard.
Apparently, suddenly, out of the blue, Peter Pritchard gets a phone call from a South African gentleman and says, I've got something you want.
The South African told Pritchard the books still existed, and he knew where they were. He wanted to talk about returning them, and was even prepared to meet face to face. On Thursday, November the 14th, 1996, the South African arrived at Pritchard's Regent Street offices.
The most peculiar situation is that I actually didn't know who Bob Monkhouse was.
He was clean-cut and wore a smart suit. In fact, he looked more like a respectable businessman than someone involved in the grimy world of joke theft.
In hindsight again, having looked at it, would I have done things differently? The answer is probably yes.
He told Pritchard he didn't have the books, and in fact he'd never even seen them. But he claimed he could get them in 5 days' time. At one point, the man said he was worried the gag files might in some way be destroyed. Whatever he meant by this, Pritchard took it as a threat. With that, the South African was gone. Pritchard called the police. Among detectives assigned to the case was John Murphy.
My involvement started just completely out of the blue one day when I was in the office at West End Central. I answered the phone and it was Bob Monkhouse, manager. They were clearly concerned that it had been made apparent to them that if they weren't to pay the reward, that the books would be harmed, destroyed or gotten rid of. If you are returning something and demanding money, but then also attaching a condition to it that you're going to harm or damage them unless the payment is made, they've just stepped up in the criminal league. It's now a demanding money with menaces or blackmail in layman's language.
It was John Murphy's job to set up a sting in Pritchard's office, where the handover had been arranged.
It was a small, self-contained room, so it was easy to wire up, as we say. We put in hidden mics. We also put in hidden cameras behind pictures or in an ornament, and we were monitoring the room on sound and vision for the whole of the time, for the whole of the afternoon. I'm now mounting the kind of operation that you'd normally associate with very dramatic kidnappings or blackmails on a far bigger, more political scale perhaps, involving huge sums of money. But nonetheless, it's a question of value, and I took the stance that the value on a personal level to Bob Monkhouse warranted the operation that we mounted.
The handover was set for 2:30 p.m. on November the 18th. It was time for Operation Bob.
The actual sting, there's a grip and climax. You've got Pritchard, who's Bob's agent and has been for decades, who's for years stood in the wings, and he deserved more than 15% for this actual day because he's suddenly centre stage.
We established a code word, a phrase that would indicate to me that the books were safely in Peter's possession and that the money had been passed over. So the phrase we hit on, as far as I remember, was, "Do you want to count it?"
And there's Pritchard, who's now suddenly at the fort. And do you know what? Bob didn't even know this was going on.
Almost on cue, a man turned up. One man on his own, carrying a case which we hoped contained the books. He went into Peter Pritchard's office, and the conversation went absolutely to plan. His first task in dealing with the guy was to confirm that they were the books, to see the books, to examine them, and to confirm for me over the video and the audio that these were the books that had been stolen. So I was satisfied that they were back. Then, secondly, we had to pass over the money. And at that stage, I decided that it was the safest time to move in. People who commit these sort of crimes are at their most vulnerable when they have the money. Their money's handed over, they stop whatever they're doing and they focus on the money, and for a moment they forget everything else. When I walked in, he looked very surprised. I got the feeling that he had no idea that this was a sting. I don't think he ever suspected that we were involved. So from that point of view, the operation had been a success.
This was Murphy's chance to become the detective who solved the showbiz crime of the century. At West End Central Police Station, the South African was hauled up from the cells to be grilled and began to sing like a canary. He said he was Alan Swain, a management consultant working in the financial services industry. His story of how he got the books was completely unexpected. He introduced another figure, a BBC employee called Liz Jacobs. He said she'd given him the books. She'd been suffering from leukemia, and her son, Hugo, who also worked at the BBC, had brought them home to cheer her up, claiming he'd found them in a bin.
The most peculiar situation is that I actually didn't know who Bob Monkhouse was. I said, look, you know, what we need to do is contact Bob Monkhouse. She said, no, she couldn't do that. She said, if I could handle it, and to keep any publicity away from her, because one of the problems with the myeloid leukemia is that with additional stress, it just speeds up the condition. So I was left with a situation where she wanted me, as with her debts, to sort out this particular problem for her.
I was quite torn as to whether he was telling the truth or not. I clearly wasn't dealing with a criminal, a criminal of any experience. And as far as I remember, he wasn't a criminal in any regard. He'd never been in any trouble with the police and was very unfamiliar with the simplest of our procedures. So on that level, you know, he wasn't playing games with me. But then, you know, he was very eager that I should believe him, which is the same as most people you question under those circumstances.
Murphy pushed Swain further. During a conversation with Pritchard, had Swain threatened to destroy the books unless a ransom was paid?
The books were not held to ransom. These books were just given back to its rightful owner because the particular client had a conscience. She didn't know how long she had to live. She wanted these books going back to its rightful owner. I was just the conduit.
Pritchard clearly had no doubt that there was a menace in the way the books were going to be returned. He had no doubt, and Bob Monkhouse had no doubt, that unless the money was paid, that they would never see the books again.
At all stages, any situation to do with money was raised by Mr. Pritchard. It was never a topic that I had discussed with him. If there were to be any kind of reward given or so on, it would have gone totally and exclusively to the client.
Things weren't looking good for Swain if his story didn't wash. He now faced a long prison sentence for blackmail.
If Swain had been charged with demanding money with menaces and convicted, he would have faced, in theory, up to 14 years in prison, a considerably lengthy period in jail. It's a very serious offence. That's the kind of territory that he was treading in.
But Swain's behaviour had hardly been that of a master criminal or blackmailer. In advance of his first meeting with Pritchard, he'd even sent a letter containing his name, business address, and mobile phone number. When they met, his manner hadn't exactly been cloak and dagger either.
I gave Mr. Pritchard my business card, which showed my name, my address, phone number, and all the information that one normally has on a business card.
Not many criminals who are operating a crime on that level, a blackmail, would have gone about it the way he did.
It was like a bank robber phoning up a bank and saying, look, just put a whole lot of money in the bag. I'm coming to rob you at 2 o'clock this afternoon, and I'll come and collect it. In fact, here's my name and address, and just please have it ready and waiting. That's how daft it was.
Even Murphy's surveillance video didn't add anything to a blackmail case.
At no stage in that video will you ever see me demanding any monies. I just walk in there, open my briefcase, hand over the books. I was happy about it, and the next thing that happened is this red plasticized bag was thrust towards me and so on. To this day, I still do not know what was in there. I never looked, I never counted. That's when we had the whole Keystone Cop operation, policemen coming from either side to do the arrest and so on. All I remember saying was, it's amazing. All I'm trying to do is hand the books over rightfully to the right people, but they weren't listening.
Swain's plight was the last thing on Bob and Pritchard's minds. They were ecstatic.
Comedian Bob Monkhouse was all smiles tonight after recovering his life's work, books filled with jokes, which went missing over a year ago.
I am overjoyed. The cow jumped over the moon, I'm jumping over the cow.
Bob celebrated the return of the books by spending £55,000 on a brand new convertible Jaguar XK8.
I just love the reaction of, you know, what he did when he actually got them back, you know. The first thing that occurred to him was to go out and buy a brand new Jaguar. Surely a photocopier would have been a better bet, really, under the circumstances.
The Jag wasn't enough. After all, if ever there was a time for Bob to really let his hair down with a big celebration, this was it. So he set off a solitary firework.
Isn't that lovely? Isn't that hilarious? And apparently the firework landed in his house, hit the joke book, and they burnt. I'm only joking.
There was less to celebrate for Alan Swain, who was charged with dishonestly handling Bob's stolen books. He was convinced he'd been framed, and his whole arrest was simply staged as a publicity stunt.
I was escorted, very conspicuously so, with the particular handcuffs, out of Mr. Pritchard's offices. All of a sudden I was blinded by flashes of light. There was no way that the photographers and the journalists could have known where I was being led without someone informing them and having them all lined up for this photograph session, which would have appeared in the paper the next day.
I don't know who told the papers that it was happening. I can speculate. I don't for a moment think it was anything to do with Bob Monkhouse or Peter Pritchard. In fact, I'm absolutely certain they had nothing to do with it. There was nothing in it for them. In their dealings with me, they were the height of discretion. They were totally reliable, and I never saw that there was any mileage in Bob Monkhouse or Peter Pritchard releasing that information to the police. Most of all, I didn't think that Bob Monkhouse would ever step outside of anything we wished during that operation, because he would never have put the books in jeopardy. He would have never done anything to make the operation go wrong.
When I looked at the books and made sure that they were the ones that we had lost, the money was passed over and the police arrived.
What tickled me most of all was Mr. Pritchard's, in one particular publication, one newspaper, stating how he cracked the case. There was never a case to crack.
If it wasn't a publicity stunt, it was hijacked for publicity. And fair play to him. That's how you work the system. And you have to say that he's been working the system for a very long time. And good luck to him.
All I could see, there was a motive for maximising publicity, and that a hero-villain type of stage production had actually taken place. I was the victim.
I would have to say, unfortunately, that I suspect that the source came probably more from the police than it ever did from Bob Monkhouse and Peter Pritchard.
As it turned out, the tip-off couldn't have come from Bob, because Pritchard hadn't even told him about the sting.
I think the worst accusation you could make about Bob is that it was a publicity stunt. He didn't need the publicity. He was in the public eye. He was riding the crest of a wave. He'd come back into fashion.
While the joke books had been returned, the case was far from solved. On February the 12th, 1992, charges against the mysterious South African Alan Swain were thrown out of court. The evidence simply hadn't stacked up. So where did all this leave Detective John Murphy? Well, theories about joke syndicates had been blown away. Comedian Adrian Walsh had been proved innocent, and Swain a good Samaritan. But what of Swain's mysterious third woman? Who was Liz Jacobs, and what really happened in that BBC office in 1995? The case of the missing gags hadn't been cracked yet. Alan Swain, who returned Bob Monkhouse's stolen joke books, had been nothing more than a go-between and was cleared of all charges. Now another mysterious figure became the prime suspect. Swain had been landed in it by his client, Liz Jacobs, who gave him the books to return on her behalf.
I don't think I was ever angry with her at all. In fact, probably angry with myself, on the basis that to be that open and honest and have it exploited was, in hindsight, as mad as it might sound, an error of judgment.
Liz and her son, Hugo, who brought the books home from the BBC, were Murphy's last hope of a conviction.
I questioned both of them. It turned out that they had the books in their house for quite a period of time. Swain never said that they stole the books, and they both vigorously denied having stolen the books.
But the question remained, why had Liz Jacobs taken 16 months to return them? It seemed the publicity had sent her into a panic.
She was in real despair, not knowing what to do. And the first thing she decided to do was take the books to her mother's house and hide them there.
Bob's books literally sat in an attic for 16 months.
I had nothing to contradict that. I had no reason not to believe it, but more importantly, I had no evidence to contradict them. So at the end of the day, their story had to be accepted, and if I accepted it, then I had to let them go.
I mean, they were obviously terrified for the best part of a year at least. At the height of their terror, did they occasionally say, let's cheer each other up, read chapter 7, go on. It's a good one, that one.
The mystery surrounding Bob's jokes has only been partly solved. John Murphy is still baffled as to why the books were taken in the first place.
Maybe somebody took them because he's a celebrity. People do that. They steal all sorts of ridiculous things from celebrities in the past. People steal pens, handkerchiefs, anything a celebrity has touched can for some people take on a value that it doesn't have in other places. Maybe somebody took them to read them and just didn't know how to give them back, or panicked, or threw them away. Maybe they were cleaned away by the cleaners. I've never really known.
No one's taking any responsibility. The person who found it in a bin. The person who got arrested for having it was giving it to the person who found it in a bin. Who are they going to arrest? The bin?
At the end of the day, I felt that it turned out pretty fair for everybody. As I said, on a personal level, when I entered the operation, I wanted to get his books back. I did. He got his books back. He was happy. He held no malice against anybody. He just wanted them back. He wasn't seeking prosecution. He wasn't being malicious. The people involved weren't criminals. Whether their explanations were completely true or not, I'll never know. But I don't think they belonged in the dock, any of them.
But no, it's not the crime of the century. And I think, you know, you're going to get a pretty rough time in prison when you're... What are you in for? Murder. What about you? Nicking Bob's jokes. So I think they probably would have got a rough time in prison, so it's probably best that it didn't get done for it.
I don't think there was a criminal mastermind at work, no. I think they were abducted by aliens. I think that as we speak, in a galaxy far, far away, there's a little green comedian with two heads who's been booed off stage because his audience doesn't know what an Englishman, an Irishman and a Scotsman are.
It's not the most serious case I ever investigated, but I always remember it. And I have something to remember it by, which is a photo that he gave me of the books. And it's, this is it. And it says, "To John, my grateful thanks. These jokes will keep me in my old age, which is only fair. I've kept them in theirs." Bob's jokes. The strange thing about the books is I used to kind of talk about the curse of Bob's books, where everybody who was involved in it, nobody earned any money. They got arrested, they nearly got sent to prison. Everybody involved in it had a tale of woe. You know, they never brought any good to anybody. Strangely enough, I left the police force not long after, and that little brush with Bob Monkhouse and Peter Pritchard, and that little brush with show business kind of stuck with me. And I've worked as a comedian for some time, and now I make a full-time living in Ireland, writing jokes and game shows and entertainment shows for television.
In the end, the theft of Bob's joke books didn't damage his career. It seemed to help it. Their loss meant he was forced to write reams of new material, this time backing everything up on floppy disk. And the new jokes were as good as ever.
I tend to sleep in the nude, which I don't think is bad, do you? No, there's nothing wrong with... Well, maybe on those long flights, but...
The man who had made us laugh for half a century carried on performing even during the last days of his battle with cancer.
I passed our local undertakers and they had my picture in the window. Said, "Coming soon."
He's part of the history. He's recorded the history. The books were part of the history of comedy. And I just think we can never, ever eliminate Bob from the history of British comedy, because he's been absolutely central to it for so many years.
8 years I did The Golden Shot. And then I went into a thing called Celebrity Squares, did 4 years of Celebrity Squares, straight from that into 4 seasons of Family Fortunes.
He understands comedy. And I think the reason he's been around for 50 years because he's made it his business to know his craft.
So I went back to the BBC, did 6 years of a bingo-based game called Bob's Full House, then back to ITV to do 4 series of the $64,000 question.
He's the ultimate in every respect. Preparation, performance, he's just the ultimate.
And then 3 more series of Celebrity Squares. Look at me with some respect. You're looking at a man who's got away with more unadulterated crap on British television than anyone else alive.
I think he's partly benefited from reminding us that, you know, what he does as a comedian, he does very well, which is to tell jokes with good timing, very good timing.
Well, the chambermaid said, "Would you like me to turn down your bed?" I said, "You might as well. Every other woman in the damned hotel there has."
On December the 29th last year, Bob Monkhouse, OBE, passed away in his sleep at his home in Bedfordshire. He was 75. Bob's death wasn't the biggest story in the world that day, but for a small island mourning the loss of a great comedian, it seemed to be all that mattered.
Bob Monkhouse will be remembered for many, many years to come, because we have videos now, we have film now, and they'll be showing them in 100 years' time. This is what people used to laugh at.
Not a very passionate woman either, really. Sexually, I suppose I'm self-sufficient. After the last time we made love, I drew a chalk outline around her body.
And he'll always be remembered as a good, slick, hard-working English comic. Proud of him.